The other big story in Washington today, the president announcing we've struck a trade deal with Vietnam that includes a 20% tariff on their imports to the U.S. and comes a week before that 90-day pause on many of his reciprocal tariffs is set to expire.
First trade deal that we've seen since that deal with the U.K. and the president putting out some more details here on social media just in the past couple of minutes. He says the terms are that Vietnam will pay a 20% tariff on any and all goods sent to the U.S. and a 40% tariff on transshipping. That's important because there's been a lot of concern about people trying to do an end run on tariffs, goods that are manufactured in China, then sent through Vietnam and then out into the rest of the global economy. That seems to be an effort to put a stop to that.
It happened in a flash. On a Tuesday morning that felt like any other, the world woke up to a headline that no one saw coming. Former President Donald Trump had just revealed a sweeping new trade agreement with Vietnam, and it sent shockwaves through the global economy. On the surface, it sounded like a win, greater access for American exports. But hidden in the fine print was a detail that blindsided markets across the globe. Every single Vietnamese import to the U.S. would now face a massive 20% tariff. That one sentence, 20% across the board, set off a chain reaction that stretched from Wall Street to warehouse floors, from rice fields in the Mekong Delta to retail shelves in Middle America. And this time, it's not just about numbers. It's about timing. It's about trust. And it's about what happens when trade policy becomes a weapon in a much bigger game. YouTube doesn't always like videos that tackle hard economic truths, but if you're someone who wants the full picture, not just the headlines, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us keep going and makes sure you don't miss what's coming next. Let's break this down.
To Wall Street now as investors react to news of a trade deal between the U.S. and Vietnam. The Dow stayed pretty much flat, but the S&P 500 locked in a new all-time high. Investors now weighing what the deal means for companies that manufacture in Vietnam, like Nike, Columbia Sportswear, Lululemon, and Lands' End. So let's bring in CBS News.
On July 2nd, 2025, Donald Trump posted just a few lines to his social media account. "Historic deal with Vietnam," he wrote. "Tariff-free access for U.S. goods. 20% tariff on all imports from Vietnam. Fair and strong." That post sounded like a diplomatic win to his supporters, but within minutes, the business world realized what had just happened. Because Vietnam isn't just a random trade partner, it's become a vital link in the post-China global supply chain. Over the past 5 years, hundreds of companies, including some of the world's biggest tech brands, moved their production into Vietnam to avoid earlier U.S.-China trade tensions.
President Trump announcing that deal with Vietnam overnight after months of talks. It'll lower the reciprocal tariffs on Vietnam from 46%, that was what would have happened come July the 9th, down to 20% now.
In 2024 alone, Vietnamese exports to the U.S. totaled over $140 billion, spanning clothing, furniture, electronics, steel components, even packaged foods. And now, every product arriving from Vietnam, whether it's a pair of sneakers or a smart TV, is suddenly 20% more expensive at the U.S. border. Let that sink in. That affordable laptop assembled in Hanoi, its price just jumped. That mid-range couch from Da Nang, retailers are scrambling to adjust. And those budget sneakers millions of kids wear back to school every fall, they're about to carry a hidden tax that families will feel. But it goes even deeper. If a product originated in China but was routed through Vietnam to sidestep tariffs, a strategy many multinational firms have relied on, it now gets hit with a brutal 40% penalty. That's right, 40%. This is more than a trade shift. It's a message, a signal that the U.S. is done playing nice when it comes to loopholes. According to administration insiders, the move is meant to punish transshipment, where goods are funneled through third-party countries to dodge tariffs, and to push for more domestic manufacturing. At the same time, Vietnam has agreed to eliminate all tariffs on U.S. exports. That means American products, especially wheat, beef, dairy, and even tech, can now enter the Vietnamese market tariff-free. Sounds fair, right? But the reality is far more complicated, because while American exporters may get a temporary boost, American importers are now facing a nightmare. Retailers, distributors, and manufacturers who built their supply chains around Vietnam are now rushing to reprice their goods, renegotiate contracts, and rethink everything. Some are canceling shipments that are already en route. Others are trying to reroute products through countries like Malaysia or Indonesia, though those options aren't guaranteed to stay open either. The truth is, trade policy moves like this don't just hit companies, they hit people. Because when the cost of a product goes up at the port, it gets passed down the chain, to stores, to shelves, to shoppers. Bloomberg analysts are already predicting price hikes of 8 to 12% for electronics by year's end. Furniture and apparel could see similar jumps. For everyday consumers, this is going to feel like inflation all over again. But here's what makes this deal different from Trump's previous trade battles. This time, the U.S. isn't targeting a rival like China. It's targeting a partner that has, in recent years, played a critical role in stabilizing global supply chains. So why Vietnam?
Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff.
According to sources close to the Trump team, it's about enforcement. The belief is that Vietnam has become a backdoor for Chinese goods, and that by hitting Vietnam hard, the U.S. can close the loophole, reassert trade control, and send a message to every country playing middleman. And while that may sound bold, it's also risky. Vietnam's economy is deeply tied to the U.S. Over 30% of its GDP comes from exports to American buyers. Thousands of factories depend on the U.S. market, and this 20% tariff has made all of them instantly less competitive. Vietnam's government, in a statement that morning, called the deal balanced and constructive. But behind the scenes, there's concern. Layoffs are expected. Factory orders are being slashed. Some Vietnamese producers are already pivoting toward China and Europe to make up for the losses. And Vietnam isn't alone. Other Southeast Asian countries, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, are watching carefully. Because when Washington imposes sudden trade changes, the ripple effects spread fast. Alliances shift. Investment pauses. Global companies rethink where they put their money. And American companies? They're caught in the middle. Many had just finished relocating from China to Vietnam. Now they're being told to move again or pay up. That's not just costly, it's destabilizing. There's even a name for this kind of policy risk: the tariff volatility premium. It's the hidden cost of doing business when government policy swings wildly. And when that premium rises, companies often take their business elsewhere, to countries with more stable trade environments. Meanwhile, at America's ports, from Long Beach to Savannah, import brokers are already flagging major disruptions. Sudden tariff hikes mean containers filled with goods are arriving with unexpected tax bills. For some businesses, that could mean millions in surprise charges. No warning, no adjustment time. And while some industries might absorb those losses, most won't. They'll pass it on to consumers.
In this deal with Vietnam, and that second tariff rate of 40% on transshipping, which really is all about Chinese products or components that are passing through Vietnam on their way to the United States. One of the things we saw following the first trade wars, the first Trump trade wars, during its first term, was that a lot of production moved from places like China to Vietnam.
Here's where it gets more complex. Yes, American farmers and exporters could benefit. With Vietnam dropping tariffs on U.S. goods, there's new opportunity for agricultural exports, especially for beef, grains, dairy, and processed foods. But those benefits will take time to materialize. Building the infrastructure for large-scale exports isn't instant, and Vietnam isn't the only country those goods can come from. Australia, New Zealand, and Brazil are already major competitors in that space. So while the Trump administration is calling this a historic win, many economists are calling it a gamble. Because tariffs don't exist in a vacuum. They change prices, they change jobs, they change relationships, and more importantly, they change trust. American businesses are now asking the same question. If Vietnam can be targeted today, who's next? That uncertainty makes long-term planning harder. It discourages investment, and it sends the message that the U.S. market, while large, is no longer as predictable as it once was. For supporters of Trump's policy, this is what strength looks like: drawing lines, closing loopholes, demanding better deals. For critics, it's chaos wrapped in a press release, a short-term win with long-term consequences. But regardless of where you stand, the message is clear. The global trade system is shifting, and this time, the tremor started not in Beijing or Brussels, but in Washington, D.C. As of now, the 20% tariff on Vietnamese imports remains in full effect. The 40% penalty for rerouted Chinese goods looms, and supply chains around the world are scrambling to adapt. Where this goes next is anyone's guess. But one thing's for sure, this isn't just about tariffs. It's about leverage. It's about power. and it's about who gets to write the rules of global trade in a post-China world. If you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're here to unpack the stories that really matter, even when the headlines don't. Because trade policy isn't just paperwork. It's the invisible force that shapes prices, jobs, and the future of the economy we all live in. Stay tuned. The next chapter is just beginning.